Feeling so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Helpless, where science, spirituality, and sustainability are brunch buddies. I'm Delanie Fischer, and details about today's topic can be found in the episode description. Returning listeners, if an episode of Self-Helpless has supported you in some way, a quick 5-star rating or review, if you haven't left one already, honestly keeps this indie podcast alive amidst the big old budget behemoths out there. So thank you for feeding the algorithm a little treat for me. Ad-free episodes are now on Patreon at patreon.com/selfhelpless, and info about some free goodies will be shared in the outro. Okay, it's podcast time. You know, there is this narrative that we are in a mental health crisis as a society, but you have a different perspective about what's going on. So can you share a little bit about the role that loneliness plays?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I've been a clinical psychologist for over 20 years.
Okay.
I've spent a lot of time in organizations. I started out as a police psychologist, so really interested in organizational stress and trauma and like what it means to ask people to do hard things and then not look after them. And then I did my residency. They said you have to do a rotation with kids, and I was like, listen, not a fan. And I have 3 of my own, so I'm kind of coming around, but I fell in love with the tiny humans, mostly because I wanted a better understanding of the neurodevelopment that has to happen or what happens when it gets interrupted. And we're talking about things like trauma and connection and, you know, that preps us for adulthood. Because people say to me all the time, like, when you do good therapy, does it always have to come back to your childhood? You know, when we have to deal with ourselves and do our work, does it always come back to your childhood? And I'm like,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes. Yes. No other opportunities to discuss anything else. You can drink all the kale and do all the yoga shit you want.
Right.
It comes back to your understanding of how you treat people and people treat you, full stop. And that usually comes very early. So that experience then just sort of led me to this place where now we talk a lot about, I was a psychologist for 20 years, practiced and on a psychiatric inpatient unit with kids, and then my own private practice. And for the last 10, I've been speaking and writing books. And I get a lot of questions about a mental health crisis. Like we've never seen, for the first time in history, in North America, we are dying faster from emotional illness than from physical illness.
Wow.
And we've never had this much access to resources or research, but we are killing ourselves faster than we are dying from physical ailments. What is happening? So then the response is obviously it's a mental health crisis. We've never seen these levels of anxiety and depression, and everybody got the ADHD, and you know what is happening. It's a mental health crisis. I agree that there's something very important happening here, but I don't think it's a mental health crisis. I think we're in an understandable human response to a loneliness epidemic. Because the two things you will not automate. So in this human race, there are 2 rules. One, we are neurobiologically wired for connection. No matter how much AI we introduce, the only AI that will matter in the healthiest among us is understanding that AI means authentic interaction. When you are good at that, when you have people in your world that are good at that, you will be better. So this number 1 rule of the human race is we're neurobiologically wired for connection. Whoever made us. I mean, it doesn't matter to me if you believe in Jesus or Buddha or the creator or the great Big Bang theory, it doesn't matter.
Right.
As a human race, first rule, we are neurobiologically wired for connection. You disconnect from an infant, they die. That will not change.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
The second rule, whoever made us, threw a curveball. They said, buckle up, bitches, despite the fact that I made you neurobiologically wired for connection, the hardest thing you will ever do is look at each other. Ha!
Yeah, that's interesting.
And in this season, we've never had so many opportunities to look away. And we are suffering and dying because of it.
We need it so bad, but being vulnerable and even being present sometimes with ourselves and our own emotions and with other people can really be the hard. It's so simple, but it is so hard. It's like one step, but what's going on there? What are the obstacles? Why we're having a hard time with that?
Well, like, just think about this, right? Like the last time you were in an elevator in LA, the last time you were having an opportunity to go for a walk or a run, right? We avoid gaze. And I was thinking about this the other day because I am in a small town in Alberta, Canada. And when I grew up in this small town, like you waved at everybody or, you know, people thought you were an asshole. So in the small town, you know, even if you didn't get demonstrative, you would raise a finger to, my husband's a farmer. So he raises this out waves, right? With his 2 fingers up, you know, that's it. Let's not get crazy and take our hands off the wheel, but like, we're still going to acknowledge another.
Right.
Today I was in the city this morning with my daughter, who is, an hour out from where we're at. And I thought, like, I do that when I'm in my small town because I'm waving to people, but I don't do that the second I come into the city. So I was trying that at the stoplights today, just giving everybody a wave. Well, they think you've been drinking. They don't know what's happening. Are you flagging them down? Or like, is there do they know you? You know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this stat is fascinating to me. It is estimated that our great grandparents looked at their children 72% more of the time than we look at our babies today.
Oof. That is a rough one. Yeah, that's a real kick to the gut right there.
And the rule is, right, we're neurobiologically wired for connection. So what is the thing that has changed so dramatically even from our parents, Delanie,
Oh,
is
yeah.
proximity to each other. Think about the square footage of the house that your grandfather was raised in.
Right.
And the square footage of the house in which we raise our babies, the size of the beds that our grandparents went to bed in, right? If they had to knock down, shoot them out, and not to romanticize, generations before, because there was a lot of shit that was happening there too.
Right.
But your proximity allowed you more opportunities to figure shit out. My husband and I, we got a king size bed. I don't even know where he is most nights. He's into Breaking Bad. I'm into some Dateline episode. We've procreated successfully. No need now to snuggle. It's warm. We got a heater. So we high five and that's it.
Interesting. And social media, all of that's a big difference between our grandparents' generation as well.
We are the first generation of parents to have access to social media.
Mhm.
We have not talked about this nearly enough. So I say to our children, your dad and I are older than Google. And they're like, holy shit. And my best friends and I, when we had a fight, I would have a couple of days to sort it out and we would come back to school and talk about it. In the evening, your dad, one generation, would come home from work and nobody could get him. Nobody. There was the sanctity of knowing your nervous system knew that nobody could get you. That changed in 2006 in the introduction of the smartphone, and in 2009 the introduction of the forward-facing camera. If we look at the data, there has been a massive decline in mental health of children and a massive uptake in suicidal completion. Mostly the highest rate of suicide in your country and mine is middle-aged men.
Wow.
And that's middle-aged white men,
Wow.
actually, the most privileged among us. Why?
Wow.
Why is the question? And not just like, this isn't just a glitch in the data. 3 times more likely to end their lives, middle-aged men. Why? Anxiety and depression will not kill you, but not talking about it might. And if you've come from a generation where this was the rule, boys don't cry. I mean, I coach minor
Right.
hockey in our little town, and I heard this last week, right? You're skating like a girl, suck it up.
Yeah.
You have to name it to tame it. And so part of the issue is when we had more proximity with each other, when we made more eye contact, when our schoolhouses were smaller, again, not to romanticize anything, but the critical piece that did not change and will not change in the massive technological advances that we witnessed, which have been beautiful in so many ways, what has not changed is our neurophysiology. We are not designed for this much noise. We are not designed for this much lack of rest. The biggest issue, John Haidt, wrote, I think, the greatest work of 2024, and he called it the anxious generation. He said 2 of the things that are different even about kids these days. I spent a lot of time talking to police officers and teachers, okay, in the world of education. I think they are 2 of the most profoundly important professions in our whole globe, and we underfund both of them horrifically. If the big people aren't okay, the little people don't stand a chance. And we often spend a lot of time worrying about kids and technology and phones, and which is a legitimate worry.
Yeah.
That will all be dictated by the big people. And so when I say, to many of us, as parents, we don't have a script for any of this. Our kids know far more about technological advances than we do, which puts us down a rung anyway. And we've never been this tired. So John would say the 2 things that are remarkably different in the last decade with kids in particular are 2 things. He says 4, but these are the 2 that matter the most to me: sleep deprivation and attention fragmentation. So in order to teach anybody anything, in order to understand how people react or get the best parts of them, they do better when they're rested. And if you think about as a whole, how much of us are sleep deprived. I mean, most of the keynotes that I give these days are titled this, how to deal with assholery-ish people these days. Huh? Because what makes us chippy? Uncertainty, fear, no end in sight. Those are the three things the most dysregulated among us. And the definition of emotional regulation is how not to lose your friggin' mind. If there's anything you want to teach your children, if there's anything you want to look for in a partner when you're dating, if there's anybody the one thing you want to look for when you're hiring somebody on your team is their capacity to stay calm in times of distress. That is the greatest predictor of mental wellness. And the definition or the title or the name for that is emotional regulation. The best leader you've ever had, the best mentor you've ever had, I promise you, had the skill of emotional regulation. They had the ability, the capacity to stay calm in times of distress. Didn't mean that they didn't lose their minds sometimes or got angry sometimes, but when shit was going south, they had the capacity to be like, okay, it's okay, right? Things are on fire, people are getting arrested, kids are puking, somebody's fighting, and they're like, okay, one step at a time. Woo, this is a tough Monday. All right, everybody, look at me. Versus the holy shit, call the cops. This is oh my, need in times of distress is an anchor. What you need in times of distress, what you need in a parenting relationship, and what we tend to need in the most intimate relationships that we have in the work and at home is somebody at some point who has the capacity to stay regulated. And here's the issue. You are not born with that capacity. Somebody has to show you. You're all born with 3 emotional regulation strategies: fight, flight, and freeze. We all get them for free. What separates humans from most other mammals is this thing in our brains called the prefrontal cortex. It lives right above your balls, your eyeballs. And everything you've ever learned in your life lives in that prefrontal cortex. When you are emotionally regulated, you have access to that. It's like a lid kind of in your brain, okay? It's like when your lid is on, you have access to your first childhood phone number. How to bake any recipe, how to speak any language, how to play any musical instrument. When your lid is on, you have access to all those things. Your kindness, your empathy, your ability to apologize, your ability to be like, shit, sorry. When you lose your mind, when you flip your lid, you go into fight, flight, or freeze. And we should do that. Our brains are designed for that, because I don't need access to your bank PIN number if a cougar has just jumped out of the bushes, right, or you're in a fight, right? I want you to flip all of that stuff out of the way. Your brain will do that when you're in danger. If nobody teaches you how to keep that lid on when somebody asks something of you or insults you or criticizes you or, gets you frustrated, if nobody said to you, okay, you got it, look at me, it's okay, it's okay. If nobody's assisted you in creating those neural pathways in your brain, you end up going through life with only fight, flight, or freeze on board. So you can imagine when we have put particularly men, boys, much more than we do women, in this position of being, you got it, suck it up, be tough. And the data is really fascinating. In many of our Fortune 500 companies right now, if you have a female at a leadership table, your company is vastly more successful.
Doesn't surprise me. Interesting.
Somebody who's emotionally regulated. And it's also true, right? If you have access to humor, which is what I love about, the work that you do, because this is so true. In order to be emotionally regulated or to have humor, you have to be calm and you have to be regulated. Like when you get into a bar fight, just remember the last time you were in a bar fight, Delanie.
Sure. Yeah. Last week.
You were not funny, right? You were one of the
How do you know?
I was there. I've been stalking you. This is what I know to be true. But do you know what I mean? Like we can be the most brilliant humans and access to things and smart and kind. And I can step into a bar and two-step and have great conversations about sports and finances and business. And if I get to a bar fight, somebody pulls my hair or hurts one of my friends, I lose access to everything. I no longer, despite the fact that I am hilarious, I don't lose my ability to be great. I lose access to it. And so many of us in this season of burnout and overwhelm and the constant inundation of noise where we get no breaks, we are supposed to rest our bodies at night. We don't. We are supposed to rest our bodies and get up in the morning and step into our people and fill up. We don't. We check our phone before we even pee. And there is nothing in there that lowers your cortisol. I promise you. When you jump into your email to get ahead of the game, there's nothing in there that's going to be like, listen, you are changing the world. And I just needed to remind you that you're the holiest human on the planet. No, there's a bunch of bullshit in there about your taxes are due. You're late for this, your kid's this, your whatever, right? And you're like, and then you jump into your socials, which we're the first generation that had so much access to each other. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's nothing in there that's also going to decrease your cortisol. You're like, this bitch is working out already. I need to be drinking more. Like, this is the issue. I woke my husband up in December 3 times like this because he's sleeping still. And I'm like, we need family pictures, and none of us have even been up yet. And that's how we step into our day. And I think what's really critical is understanding that we are wired for the hustle. We came from a generation that said, if you rest, you're weak, you're lazy. What we didn't know, right, is just one generation ago, Sundays were sacred. Depending on your spiritual belief, Sundays or Saturdays, you didn't work. In fact, you couldn't because everything was closed. And many of us were expected to attend some form of spiritual connection, right? Which meant, you went to church or you went to the synagogue or you did somewhere where there was stillness and you prayed. We didn't factor that in to the concept of rest, right? When you came home at 5 o'clock, when my parents came home from work at 5 o'clock, nobody could get them. So my dad would lay on the couch and watch MASH, and then we would have dinner and, whatever the deal was. If anybody needed us, they would call the home phone and we wouldn't answer that during dinner, right? If it was that big of an emergency, it would still be an emergency after dinner. Like now we don't even leave the office. If you go to the office, if you're in your home, there's no more sanctity anymore because people are texting and emailing and then just God forbid I miss anything. So I got an Apple Watch strapped to me, which is like a cortisol shooter. Strapped to my wrist at all times. So just in case, like in this moment, my kids are not in school today, but if they were, they could access me anytime. My body knows that, right? There's no break. If I go on holidays, if it's a Sunday night, my patients can get me. My parents can get me, my aging parents, my dad's in the, end stages of dementia. If he buzzes this watch, or somebody who I love, who is with him, buzzes this watch, I'm at work, I love them more. So no matter what I'm doing, you don't get my full attention.
Right.
And so we talk about, what does that mean for teachers? What does that mean for physicians? What does that mean for people that are trying to stay connected to other humans and serve them because of their medical concerns? Like I've been in many physicians' office, trying to talk about how scared I am about perimenopause and I think I'm dying. And I can see they're referencing their watch because they're getting, who knows, maybe somebody's in the ER, maybe their kids are sick, maybe something's happening. We are not good enough to stay connected to people. Right. Because of the technological advances. We're not designed that way. Okay. So the market capitalization, if I were to just take the 4 bigs for a moment, right? Meta, Amazon, Uber, Apple. In this moment, this morning, they own $4.8 trillion in market capitalization. So the desire to keep us connected to those phones. Right. Is you're not that good. You're like, I'm not going to look at my phone after 8. Bullshit. I'm going to charge my phone by my room. I know I should charge my phone outside of my room. Do I? No. I tried once and then I got up and got it. Like the allure of these things is massive because it's connected to everybody and everything we love. And it's designed specifically for you. Zuckerberg, I don't think Meta had any idea how good they were going to be, because what they do, what has happened is that yours is designed specifically for you, mine is designed specifically for me. So even if I were to scroll, for example, on my husband's phone, so he's got a PhD in ruminant nutrition, which means basically like how you feed cows. And he's a big golfer, loves golf, loves cows. Okay. I don't love either of those things. So if I were to go scroll on his Instagram page in this moment, there's, heifers and golf tees. I'm not going to stay there very long because that's not for me. Right. Mine is all about perimenopausal nutrition and women in sport. Not a fan. So they're designed for me. It's designed for you. So the people or the things outside of that have to be really quite sexy to get your attention outside of that. And I say this to teachers all the time. For sure, kids shouldn't have phones in school. I'll die on that any day. But you know who else shouldn't have phones in schools?
Who is the person in your life that's the hardest to shop for during the holidays, birthdays, really any time of year? I have been told that I am actually that person. I'm a minimalist, so I like quality, functionality, something that's ethically sourced. When I purchase a new gift for myself or someone else, I prioritize all of those things as well, which is why I love Cozy Earth. They have incredible everyday essentials like comfy loungewear and bedding. I have their bamboo stretch knit pajama set in one of my favorite colors, olive green. It is the softest thing that's ever touched my body. They have this bubble blanket. It's got a nice weight to it, but it's not too heavy. It's just something that people immediately notice when they walk into our living room and they want to touch it and try it out. Absolutely makes such a great gift. Black Friday has come early at Cozy Earth. Right now, you can stack my code HELPLESS on top of their site-wide sale, giving you up to 40% off in savings. These deals will not last, so start your holiday shopping today. I personally like to get my shopping done early, and if you get a post-purchase survey, be sure to mention that you heard about Cozy Earth on Self-Helpless. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth.
For sure, kids shouldn't have phones in school. I'll die on that any day. But you know who else shouldn't have phones in schools? Teachers, childcare workers, right? Well, what if there is a local phone that can access you if something happens, right? Because we're not that good. People often have these conversations with me about, kids these days and the data around kids these days and the dysregulation and the lack of, you know, focus and effort. And I say, okay, I agree. Ooh, we're in trouble. Tell me what you've noticed about parents these days. How have they changed?
This is all obviously making us lonely, being addicted to all the social media and stuff, which, a lot of parents are on their phone, the kids on the iPad. We see this a lot. But what makes me feel lonely also is that if you want to get out of that, if you want to say, hey, let's go screen free for the weekend and let's delete our social media, which I did a few years ago. A lot of people don't want to do that with you. So that can make you feel lonely. So it's like you feel like you're lonely if you're in this cycle of doing all this stuff. And then when you're trying to break out of it, you have to really actively seek people who want that same thing. And a lot of the time, it might not be people in your proximity. But anything that you want to say about any of that?
You're right. I think what's really true right now is that we're up against it. We are the first generation that are rewriting roles. We're the first, for the first time in history, women are becoming remarkably successful and getting places in sports, on stages, in workplaces. That is beautiful. The issue is we do better with predictability. We do better when roles are clear and we understand specific functions.
Mm.
There is a price to pay for freedom, which is we're now in a time where, I mean, I say to my daughter all the time, like, you can do anything. Mom, in our marriage, for the first time in our respective family histories, as the woman, I'm earning more than my husband does. That's a big, there's a big room for conversation there, right?
Right.
What does that mean for him? What does that mean for his dad? What does that mean for his mom? What does that mean for my parents? What does that mean for our children? What's I'm so cute that you got this really successful career. What are you going to do with the children? They don't have a script for it, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm like, well, listen, I married a pretty competent husband. Like, he knows how to run the Tylenol. But this is then also my fear. Well, fuck, but then I miss this and then I miss that. And like, is this worth it? And I don't know. And the constant inundation of social media keeps us in a place where there's a comparative factor that wasn't in play even one generation ago. So I think that what becomes really critical is understanding, for me, the neurophysiology behind it all.
Hmm.
Because we, again, haven't lost our ability to be great, but we have to be very conscious about how easy it is to lose access to it, to get stuck in the spin, to be able to spend most of our days from an emotionally dysregulated space. We not only lose access to the best parts of ourselves, but the best parts of us being able to show the next generation how to do it. And the onus then becomes on us a little bit. And here's the good news that I have. Okay. So if I were to say to you, where's the hope for humanity? I think it's massive. I mean, when I spend time with my children, the cohort of kids that are, going to be responsible for the next generation, I have so much hope because they're brilliant.
Hmm.
The ability to have hard conversations around inclusivity and gender identity and what it means to sort of be kind in this world. we have conversations with our kids that I would have never dreamed having at my kitchen table. Part of the issue for me too is that it's going to be so easy to be successful and to create yourself as invaluable in positions in your work, mostly because the bar's so low. The bar has never been this low to be great. Here's why. When people feel disconnected and lonely, what they want is simply to be seen. And it is as simple as it is complex, because as you said to me, at the beginning of this conversation, it's like, okay, this is quite easy, but holy shit, it's hard. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. Anything that I've written about, anything that I speak about, never is like, this is not groundbreaking. This is not groundbreaking. Like we know the rules of what makes us successful and healthy. We've always known them.
Yeah.
We've never had such a hard slog to get back to the truth. And that's the good news, is that we know it in our bones. You and I know it when we are at our best selves. And often it comes like this: drop your shoulders. If you're listening to this, drop your shoulders in this moment, wiggle your toes, and drop your tongue from the roof of your mouth. The most primitive response to stress is we slam our tongue to the roof of our mouth. Typically, when we get a notification on our watch, we hear a notification on our computers, a kid says, "Mom," our boss says, "Jode," whatever that's.
Yeah.
And it's very primitive, right? Because what that does is gets us prepared for the fight, or action in any capacity. Now, if we've never had this much shooting cortisol, this much access to us, our parents, our employees, our employers, our partners, our children, and then we hook ourselves up here and we carry this and we sit in front of a computer all day, it's like bing, 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 bing. So our tongue stays a lot of time up here. Our jaws stay quite tight. Even if we're just doing yoga and shit,
Mm-hmm.
on purpose, there needs to be a conversation around getting back into the best parts of our bodies. Resting on purpose, disconnecting. People say, this is what I find so funny. I don't know if you hear this all the time in LA, but it's like, I love humanity, but I just don't like people. Like, my biggest wish is that I could go into the woods in a cabin where nobody could get me. And it's like, do you also know that, like, we could shut our phones off? Like, that, right?
Right.
Or I say this all the time. I was just telling you this. I fly probably 200 days a year, and a plane has become my favorite place on the planet, mostly because nobody can get me.
Yes.
And it is the first time that my body knows that no matter what happens in this 4-hour flight or this 6-hour flight or this 1-hour flight, if something goes wrong with my kids or the people I love the most, there's nothing I can do about it till I get on the ground. And there's very few safe places that we have the capacity to disconnect ourselves from when we have so much access to everybody and everything. And I think that's been one of the most significant shifts, because we need each other. Even a text message, like, the data is really clear around this. An email, even a text message, even a FaceTime, does not create the same neurophysiological change as if you and I were doing this interview in the same room. Now, because of technological advances, we can be in 2 different countries and have this beautiful conversation, so that your community gets access to me, my community gets access to you. Praise be, this is beautiful. This is why we can use technology for good. Okay, got it.
Right.
I can FaceTime my dad today. He's, I won't be able to ever leave the nursing home again. And so if I want to spend time with him, I can do that. If I'm on the road, my children get to see my face every day. Beautiful.
Yeah.
What we will never automate, though, is the neurophysiological response that would happen, the depth of our conversation that would have been very different if I was in LA in this moment.
Yeah.
Will not automate that process. And so the more we make it easier not to, right, the more we will use it, because we're exhausted and overwhelmed, right? And I think about this in the concept of grief a lot. If somebody died tragically up the road in your childhood, you had no other opportunity than to go, to support, to bring food. Now there's so many excuses not to. I'm going to send an emoji. I'm just going to send something. I'm going to, versus like, go. What is so necessary, never underestimate the power of just showing up. I promise you. That will solidify your place in your respective companies, in your organizations, in your marital relationships, in the relationships with your children. Whenever you have the capacity to go. And it doesn't mean, so many times, I fight with this in my own head about, like, okay, so what does that mean when I travel this much? What does that mean? when I'm regulated, I know that my kids are good. When I'm regulated, I know that I can't tell them how to chase their dreams. I got to show them. And so the importance then becomes, how do we also show them how to rest?
How does someone even begin to become aware that they might be disconnected and lonely if that's all they've ever known, right? Like what's the impact going to be on these kids in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? How can somebody start to have that awareness? Like what does loneliness even look like if it's the norm?
Yeah, the pendulum will swing, as it always does. But I think what's so fascinating. Okay, so who I love the most is your former Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. He served 2 terms. He's got a military background and like probably one of the most brilliant scientists. He he was the guy responsible for sort of talking about this loneliness epidemic, and the research around it that he sort of created is fascinating. He suggested that, in any sort of classroom in this moment, 50% of all kids in the last week would say, I'm not sure that I have anybody who cares about me.
Mm,
And when we look at young moms, 51% would say this is the loneliest experience. I don't know like how other people are doing this. Am I doing this right with my baby? There's so
yeah.
much inundation. You don't have auntie and grandma and 2 sisters coming over going like, it's okay. You
Right.
go rest. It's all like you're scrolling through. Do you have this jogger and this wrap? Are you wrapping your baby? Are you wearing your baby? Are you gentle parenting? Are you screen free parenting? Did you, you didn't have a dolphin assisted pool birth? Well, they're fucked.
Right. I think some of the loneliest that I feel currently or, now is when at a party or in a room full of people and everybody's on their phone, literally surrounded by people. But then I come home and I might be by myself. Maybe my husband is out or whatever. And I'm actually at home alone and I do not feel lonely. I feel great. I feel connected and I'm actually physically by myself. Anything that you want to share about that concept?
I mean, I think that's a beautiful indicator, Delanie, that you're healthy. And I think that, when we are most comfortable with ourselves, that's where it's got to start. And a lot of us will have been spending more and more solitary time. So there's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. So
Right.
you can be lonely in a room full of 100 people.
Yes.
You cannot be, as you said, lonely at home by yourself. And I think, part of the deal is just having conversations like this. And because now, your listeners today and you and I having this conversation, we can't unhear this stuff. We now think
Right.
about it different. I think about it all the time, like when I waved to the guy in the city today and my daughter's in the front seat and I'm like, let's get his attention. Like when we were passing this big semi truck, I was like, wave at that poor guy up there, give him a wave. And she's like, Mom. I'm like, yeah. How many people do you think he's talked to in the last 6 hours? Right? Give him a go. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like you can't tell people how you have to show them. And I think, what becomes really critical is in those rooms where we feel lonely, other people will too. So how
Mhm.
do we then recognize that it's actually nobody else's responsibility to shift that? Our only job, the only people we have control over is us doing the next best right kind thing.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
So if I'm at a party like that and I'm feeling alone or I'm feeling lonely and there's 100 or there's 20 people who I love or I have various degrees of relationship with, my job is to be able to appreciate that they're probably, statistically speaking, lonely too.
Mm.
And what that does for me is regulates my system and then I'm braver. I'm more vulnerable. I'm more likely to come up to them at a party and start a conversation. We just had a 50th birthday party for a friend of ours this last weekend, and none of us have spent a lot of time together. And some of them I love, some of them I don't. The conversation my husband and I had even about going was interesting to me, right? Like, are we gonna do this? Like, and I'm like, holy fuck! Like, very many of us have raised our children together. Like, we haven't seen them in a very long time. I remember my parents, like, we couldn't wait till Friday night to go play cards at the neighbors
Yeah.
because you hadn't spent any quality time with people. Now we're just so overwhelmed. And so I was like, no, man, like we are absolutely going. And even the angst that I felt sort of stepping into that, navigating, okay, who's who, who's where, what do I say? Do I know what's happening? I've seen half of this on social media. I think those two are breaking up. I think this one's staying. Like, and if there's been any lack of resources, because in this particular week, you feel shitty about your body, you didn't work out, you're not looking after yourself, you don't know what to do. You're like, you're out. Because the amount of resources it takes to assume that maybe they're lonely too is a pretty long walk back. And so when we get there, when we can take that, then it becomes so much easier. And oh my gosh, what happens then when you're like, really? Oh my, how are you? And you find out like, no, this, my kid is really struggling here, or no, dad is in his last stages of dementia. So many of our good friends had no idea
Mm-hmm.
because that's not the shit we generally share on social media.
Right.
And we were never meant to do any of this alone. This is the point. We are neurobiologically wired for connection. We were not meant to do any of this alone.
Yeah.
And I think our greatest challenge for our generation will be to, on purpose, maintain and reinitiate those relationships.
Yeah, there's a lot of narratives around fear, right? Like the news, everything is just be afraid of each other, be afraid of all the stuff that's going on, and how that impacts how we treat each other when we're walking down the street, not looking at each other, right? Are we afraid of a stranger? I mean, men are talking about how they're actually afraid to wave at a woman or smile at them because they know we're kind of terrified of them if we're walking down the street, right? So, how can we kind of hold both things like, we're not being naive about things that could happen, but we also maybe are being kinder or more present when we are around people? How do we do both?
The next book that we're pitching in this moment, this is my working title, Be Kind and Don't Tolerate Bullshit, in that order. I think that's the new rules of the game. And I think that if you get really caught in your head about all of the things, I think that, I did this marital conversation with a bunch of farmers. I did a workshop a couple days. And I had them in there, talking about relationship and connection. And we started speaking about, this researcher named Anand started this whole research protocol around the 4 minutes of connection. And it's this most remarkable piece of research that he's replicated again and again and again. And the only job of his research participants is to look at each other for 4 minutes. Okay. So he's done this with siblings and with, moms and sons and, partners and any dynamic you could imagine. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, even if so when I was reading this data, I was like, how hard can it be to look at each other for 4 minutes? Like, my personal husband and I have been married for 15 years. Like, we've got 3 kids on the ground together. So I came home and I was like, and he's a smart guy. So I was like, which is irrelevant, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. You're welcome. And I just said to him, listen, I was reading this research today, honey, and I just like, can we just sit down and look at each other for 4 minutes? And he said to me, why? What do you mean, why? I had a lot of choices in 2009 and I chose you. So like, sit down.
Right.
So, I mean, he's a scientist. And so he's like, okay, fine. We can do it as long as we can time it, because God forbid we go over the phone. So what's really interesting is he starts the timer and we're looking at each other and he calls a timeout, like a big fucking T, like timeout. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I just got a few questions. Like, what am I looking for? Is this a new haircut? Did you get a new shirt? I was like, oh my God, just look at me. And what's really interesting is if you can make the 4 minutes, there's a really reliable trajectory that tends to happen, even particularly with the people we love the most, our children, our moms, our husbands, our parent, whatever. In the first 30 seconds, it's uncomfortable. You start to sort of like look at each other and make faces and like, oh my God, this is hard. And then you get into that 2 minutes and it's like, oh, and you can kind of sink in a little bit more. If you can last past 3 minutes, what inevitably happens is you get emotional,
Interesting.
because most of what is written between us doesn't have words. And when I don't look all the time, I don't see. And when I slow down long enough to look at my children, I see pieces of my parents in them. I see pieces of their dad in them. When I look at my husband, the busyness of life, we're navigating 3 kids, we're navigating 2 companies. We want to contribute to the community. We have to go on holidays. Do we? Do we have Christmas cards? I don't fucking know. What do we like? The opportunities to look at each other is very rare. And when you do that, you start to see, I mean, I remember what he looked like on our wedding day. I haven't thought about that in a number of years, right? There's only me on this planet that knows what he looked like when he woke up in the floor of the Foothills Hospital when our baby boy was in the NICU. Nobody else knows that except me. Nobody else knows what I looked like, after I had our twins than him.
Right.
And even if we don't stay together, and I say this often, as relationships navigate, you will never, ever, ever, nobody will ever know you like that human did in that chapter of your life. And when we don't look, we don't see, we lose access to empathy. The first order of business in any couple's work, for me, from my therapeutic perspective, is to get 2 people to look at each other. And I cannot tell you how hard that is.
Oh, I can't wait to try this with my husband. Set the timer, baby. Let's do it. It's so interesting, and I have definitely, couples therapy has changed my life, our life,
Beautiful.
completely transformed our relationship, and I remember that being a big thing that came up for me is that part of the exercises we were given were to, like, have these conversations, carve out this time together. We have, like, a weekly meeting where we sit down and chat about, what came up this week and how we're doing and all that, things that we just didn't have in place before. But when we first started doing that, I remember feeling so uncomfortable that he was giving me that much attention. And made me realize about male attention from my past and all of that. And I had been so used to just kind of 30 seconds here and there, spurts of attention, that that was my comfortability level. And so a lot of my history was going after, emotionally unavailable men because that's what was normal for me. And it almost felt unsafe to get something different. And so when he started giving me that attention, I told him, I was like, wow, I just became really really aware how uncomfortable I am that you are looking at me and talking to me for this long. And we talked about it with our therapist and everything, but yeah, I've had that moment of realization of like, what the fuck is going on? This is what I should want and what I have been wanting from my husband, but now he's actually giving it to me, and it's freaking me out to kind of
I
feel
love
seen, you
that.
know?
The most vulnerable emotion on the planet, joy. It is the
Interesting.
most vulnerable emotion on the planet. And when you can genuinely feel that and make somebody else feel that joy, it is a fleeting emotion, particularly as we get more dysregulated. It is hard. And I say this to people all the time. When is the last time you belly laughed with your babies? When is the last time you danced in your kitchen sober? When is the last time, you just laid on the bed with your best friend and just peed? You laugh so hard, right?
Yeah,
We know. I mean, this is a long old adage that has never been so true, that laughter is the best medicine. It releases all kinds of neurotransmitters in your body, decreases cortisol, oxytocin and serotonin increase. Those are the feel good hormones, or the feel good neurotransmitters. We need those chemicals in our systems. How many of us in the run of a workday, when we've got to do this podcast, we've got to do this, what is next? Do we have groceries? What's happening? Do we have enough capital? When you have
mhm,
the capacity to look at life through that lens, have a capacity to find some joy, or you
right.
have at least a reprieve where you can go and somebody can take you through there, it's like sunlight.
It's scary to be happy. In a lot of ways, it's sometimes easier to be miserable because you're just focused on getting through the misery to the other side. And then when you feel like, I feel great right now, I don't want anything to change, and I know that it's going to, it is just an overwhelming hit of
Oh my God, you're
you know,
so right. And
it's
here's a
tough.
couple of truths I'll tell you real quick. Misery does not love company. Misery loves miserable company.
Oh,
So
yes.
it's contagious, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is that when people come to me in therapy and they're, like if I ask them what they want for their child or their partner or their, generally speaking, I would say, if you have one wish for somebody you love, what do you wish for them? And they
Right.
say,
Happiness or
I
that
just
kind of
want
thing.
them to be happy. That's so fucking dumb, because nobody's happy all the time. My
Right.
wish is that you, your husband, the people you love the most, have the capacity to feel deeply all of the emotions,
Mm,
because they will not kill you. Not talking about a might. And so much of this, when we wish for our people to just feel deeply the grief that is in their life, feel deeply the sadness, and understand that none of those emotions will last forever. That
right.
happiness is beautiful, but it has nothing, it is no better or worse. It feels better neurophysiologically in our bodies, which is why we put an emphasis on it. None of us like to be losing our minds. None of us like to feel the gut punch of grief. None of us like to feel any of those things. But the truth of the matter is, the more you have a script for them, the more you know how to navigate through them. And we make a big mistake, I think, these days in trying to keep everybody happy. Like everybody gets a medal, or, just like, it's okay, don't worry, let's plant a tree. I'm going to make you feel better. The greatest gift you can give anybody you love and yourself is to feel every emotion deeply and know that you will come up the other side. And the only reason you can believe your body will believe you'll come up the other side is if you go through it.
Mhm.
Can't tell your body it's okay, you gotta show it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Just this happened just even a few weeks ago. I was with my husband, I was with Cam, and I just started thinking about how much I love him and I started crying. And it's like, what's wrong? Just thinking about how much I love you and it's making me sad, and that is an uncomfortable feeling. And also the fact that he was there to witness it was also uncomfortable. But yeah, when we actually allow ourselves to feel the full joy, but also the other side of that is kind of the sorrow of that joy. It seems like we are kind of overwhelmed with all the mental health labels out there. So many things are similar symptoms. Is there really this much stuff going on? Or are we going to find out it was a few things and we were just in a sick society having normal reactions to it? Do we have to overdiagnose because that's the only way people can get help in the way that the system is built? Anything that you can share about that?
In a system of trying to, when things feel yucky, we want to name it. We want to figure out what's happening. And if we look at this data, this loneliness feeling is not anything we want to feel because it feels awful. It's much more than just a feeling. It significantly impacts the way we show up in our families and in our work. There's an increase in absenteeism when employees identify as lonely, a decrease in access to things like purpose and motivation, creativity, innovation. All of those things go away. So it's not just a feeling, right? And so when those things start to happen, we're like, okay, what must be wrong here? And at the best of times, any emotional or psychological diagnosis, it's very subjective, right? So like I can't do a blood test, largely speaking, for anxiety, depression, even autism, right? ADHD. Those are all a cluster of symptoms that we have identified from a psychiatric perspective that this groups together. And you're right. When I look at the symptoms of, ADHD or somebody on the spectrum, they are very similar to a kid who's just overwhelmed. Always, what I think is so critical in the diagnostic process is the system needs to be taken into account. When I do a solid assessment, that becomes one of the most critical places. And I think right now, there is so much emphasis on trying to figure out what is wrong with people. And we ask this question all the time: what is wrong with this one? What is wrong with this one? We never ask, what happened to this one?
Mm-hmm.
And when you switch that question from what is wrong here to what happened here, the context allows you to understand why the symptoms might be there. And
Right.
you get much better at then depicting whether this is a legitimate neuro-based issue or whether we are describing impact of an experience.
Mm.
And that results into sometimes two very different treatment approaches. But we become very quick at labeling people because you're right. Sometimes in order to get supports or funding or resources, you need a label.
Mm.
And we fought all the time in public practice about this. Like, I know I am not going to say this just because, well, then they don't get the funding. And you're like, fuck, you're right. Okay, so how can we advocate for in this very noisy system that when this
Yeah.
kid or this family or this human's just a number, that's a conundrum, right?
Mm.
And but I truly think that so much of what we're seeing, particularly in the space of mental health, is better understood as overwhelmed. Brene Brown talks about this beautifully. We are developing beyond human capacity. And so what you will see is a human response to a place where we're not designed to be. And so what do we do about that? Do we shut down technological advances? Well, I mean, I wish we were that good. It would be nice if the internet could shut off at 6 o'clock at night across the globe. Wouldn't that be lovely? We know that's going to happen. If it could, you would see remarkable impact increases in mental health.
Mm.
It's undeniable.
Right. Yeah.
And we can't do that. The horse is out of the barn, John Haidt talks about, right? And I think that the onus then becomes on each of us to take a look and to take stock at our own stuff, because we're not going to live long enough for the president to do it, or the prime minister, or the president of your company, or the CEO, or the mayor of the city needs to, like this. Listen, we get very good at if. Okay, You can blame all the other people. Guess who has the biggest responsibility? If you want to feel better in your own system, it's up to us to do the next best right kind thing. And you have access to everything you need right now if you drop your shoulders, if you drop your tongue from the roof of your mouth, if you give yourself enough reprieve to sleep. Greatest predictor of mental wellness right now, this is the number one question I ask in assessments, is how is your sleep?
Yeah, that's a huge one.
Right?
Like you said, like the questions, what's wrong with this person? This person's defective, right? But why aren't we asking, well, what's wrong with society? Like, what's wrong with their environment? What if this is just a normal reaction to things that have been normalized for us that are making us deeply unwell? And like with your work, when we focus on reconnecting with ourselves and other people, how much of that anxiety and depression and addiction falls away as a result? This relationship with burnout and loneliness. And I know for me personally, when I'm overwhelmed or feeling burnt out, I do kind of retreat from people because I feel like, okay, I have to go hibernate so I can get my shit together and catch up on all my work and my laundry and this until I go out and see people again, which is probably the opposite of what I should probably be doing as somebody, who might be overwhelmed in that moment. I should be reaching out for support. Anything that you want to share about the burnout part of this?
Yeah. So the definition of burnout is when the resources outside of work intended to fill your soul are not greater than those that get sucked from your soul at work.
Oh,
So burnout isn't actually a function of the work that you do or how hard your job is. It is a function of your capacity, your insight around the importance of resting, the importance of filling back up. And Freudenberger came up with this concept. He's a dead German psychologist. He came up with this concept of burnout in 1974. And he was studying a drug addiction population at the time and wasn't even looking at organizational stress. What he was noticing is that certain people, when they felt incompetent or overwhelmed or that their efforts were futile, they started using excessively to the point that they stepped away from their families or their job. And we colloquially labeled them burnouts. This guy's a burnout
mm,
because he uses so much. This is like still a common term we
right,
use, like he's burnt out, right?
right.
He transferred that data, that understanding into the occupational stress place and said, here's what we notice in people who start to burn out in their jobs. They look very much like addiction or addicted burnouts. Three things you'll notice. They're emotionally exhausted, which means not just like it's Q1 or we got to get through this string of tour dates. It's like on any given Wednesday, we're just tired to our bones. And these days when we're not resting well enough, that makes a lot of sense because we
Wow.
spend a lot of time in uncertainty, fear, no end in sight. Those three things that dysregulate us the most. If you think about this, if you're housing insecure, financially insecure, if your relationships are falling to shit, uncertainty, fear, no end in sight. If you've ever heard cancer, the word cancer in your family system, uncertainty, fear, no end in sight. Three components of a global pandemic,
Mm,
uncertainty, fear, no end. Many of us like this, shoulders up. So emotional exhaustion is quite present. And then we go home and we're supposed to go to rest and frolic and play board games and shit, right?
yeah.
We're so exhausted that we just want to sink into somebody else's reality, right? Dateline,
Mhm.
Netflix, whatever that is. Further abating this capacity to stay connected, to look at each other's eyeballs. Then it leads to what Freudenberger would say the second thing of burnout that he'd noticed. So emotional exhaustion, then a lack of compassion starts to set in.
Mm.
So we used to be nice, he says, which is true. When you're tired, if you've ever seen a toddler miss a nap, they become assholery-ish.
Right.
And so do all of us. And so if
Yeah.
we've been emotionally exhausted, we lose access to compassion. And then the third thing that he said you'll notice in people who are burnt out is this concept of futility, which basically means your give a shit is broken. What's
Mm,
the point? And it becomes contagious. And
yeah.
so if you work in a team, if you work in an organization where this has taken hold, this concept of burnout becomes so powerful to understand because unless you see it for what it is, it becomes very difficult to shift a culture. Because then what we try to do is Mary Poppins, the ever-loving Jesus out of it. So we take the most healthiest one left and we're like, hey, Linda, could you go and just like, woo, get everybody back on track, and this poor Linda, she still has some optimism and hope. And so she goes into the water cooler space and she's like, hey, everybody, you guys want to do a potluck on Friday? And people are like, fuck off, Linda, you know? So then Linda quits because she's like filing a grievance. And then you just like stay in this perpetual abyss of like, this is terrible. But then
Right.
you're aligned. right? Like then there's
Right.
some community in like how awful this world is, and like, you know, our senior leaders don't get it. Like fuck them. They don't know what it's like on the front line. They are equally as exhausted and burnt out and feeling futile or feeling futile and incompetent. And so you can see when leaders are in that space, there is very little opportunity for the people that they're leading to grow. I just spoke at the United Nations at the head of the General Assembly this year,
Mm.
having some conversation around, you know, where do we shift our dollars? How do we, you know, where do we invest? And I said quite clearly, for me, the greatest interventions or investments right now are in teachers, police officers, and parents. Because if the big people aren't okay, the little people don't stand a chance. If you can't regulate the people that are responsible for regulating most of the humans on this planet, we're going in the wrong direction. This is like the greatest quote of all time. It changed my life when I read it. It's by a dead guy named Ram Dass.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was a philosopher and a yogi. He said this: "We are all just here walking each other home.
I love that one. Yeah.
Nobody gets out of here alive." Some of the most profound work we will ever leave as legacies will come in our walking with other people. And if you're regulated, you're in a phenomenal walker, right? If I look at, you know, the best moments I've ever had with my children, with my husband, it's when I'm regulated, when I am doing, you know, those moments of sitting with my dad or, you know, having really important conversations with my mom or my best friend. And we need the walkers, and we need to be the walkers. And so how do we focus on, you know, creating more of that in at our kitchen tables, at our community resources, in, you know, the work of service that we do. And when you understand your role as a walker and you're armed with this capacity to simply acknowledge other humans, you'll change the world.
Dr. Jody, thank you so much. If you want to leave anybody with like a favorite tip for maybe becoming more emotionally regulated today, and then where can people find your work, all that good stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked so much about it today. You got this. And I think the idea is you don't need anything more. You need to get back to the best parts of you. It's already there.
Yeah.
I have assessed and treated thousands of people in your country and mine, and not one time have I met a bad one. Not one time. I
Mm.
met a lot of dysregulated people who don't think they matter and who think they've screwed up a lot, and you know they may or may not have. But getting back to the best parts of all of us, it's in there. I believe that to be true. I have a podcast called Unlonely. I've written 3 books. The last one's called Feeling Seen, and we're always on the web here at drjodycarrington.com. You can find us all there.
Thanks for hanging out with Self-Helpless. Feel free to share this with someone who could use it, and you can binge related conversations linked in the show notes. Ad-free episodes are now available on Patreon, and because I'm practically allergic to social media, the best way to get notified about new episodes is to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or join the email list at selfhelplesspodcast.com, where you will also find some free goodies like a watch and read list and the quote buffet. All right, love you big time, and thank you so much.